Fortunately, I was there for Pauly Shore's early 90s Hollywood reign, where some of his films were pretty big box office hits, all things considered, especially, like Encino Man, Son-in-Law, and whatnot. And they weren't necessarily big budget films, so it all kind of worked out, especially for Pauly. This was Pauly's time in the sun, and he knew it, and he loved it. But some quote-unquote bad decisions led to Pauly's films kinda head into the bargain bin section over the years. But still, let me make this clear right now. I like everything the dude has ever done. I was in the theaters watching his movies in the 90s. I was there at my local video store to be the first one to rent The Bogus Witch Project. I was there for the CMT premieres. I was there for the premiere of his underrated documentary. You get the gist. I love me some Pauly Shore. But alas, out of all the films in Pauly's initial run, what I like to call the Big Five, Bio-Dome is the only one that was released under the MGM banner and is the only one that has achieved true cult status. Let's get to the bottom of it. But first, be sure to like this video. I'm trying to get the channel growing, especially now that I can't do much since I hurt my bladder rollerblading. Make sure you're subscribed, as here at Staunch TV,
we're dependent on balancing homos within the system.
Go ahead and grab yourself some purple sticky punch. Free the mahi-mahi, and let's smuggle some grapes as we look back at Pauly Shore's only legit cult classic, Bio-Dome. Bio-Dome was produced in that sweet spot in the 90s where like Brad Crevoy and Steve Stabler were still producing these oddball comedies. I've covered one of them. Check out my Miracle Beach video next. And this is where these kind of comedies had proven to be blockbuster hits. Sometimes, So in turn, every studio was churning them out. We got a slew of teen gross-out comedies from many smaller studios, all to varying degrees, of course, featuring oddball comics sometimes. You guys remember this movie?
Carrot Top is
certifiably insane
chairman of the board.
Look out! Don't worry, I got an emergency brake!
And sometimes like rappers and whatnot in the lead roles. I watched all of these movies as they came out.
Oh shit, it's Kitty fucking Fox!
I'd like to get you in a marsh pit.
And as for the teen films, well, there were a lot. Not only movies about teens, but like movies aimed at teens. Well, yeah, again, smaller productions did happen, but in this case, serious money was spent experimenting with these movies. Movies like Tank Girl, Dazed and Confused even, and yeah, of course, Bio-Dome. One of my favorite things right off the bat about this movie is it has one of those 90s iconic intros, you know what I mean? One of those intros that kind of harkens back to like Airheads or like, PCU, Freaked, all those movies with those great intros. One of my favorite tropes from the 90s. You guys remember that? Like the cartoon that was part of the intro for Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead? Or one of my favorites, the cartoon intro and like outro and whatnot, whatever it was, for Weekend at Bernie's 2. I should probably cover that film next. I love that movie. The film did have some strange origins. It was basically like created and handed off and handed over between producers and bounced back and forth to where there's like, I think like 4 created by credits and like 2 written by credits or something. None of this really makes sense how it all got made, but it got made regardless, And in the early stages of the film, actors like Harlan Williams and Dana Gould auditioned for the lead roles. Could you imagine that? I don't know how that would have worked. And then it's even rumored that it eventually kind of became potentially the third part to the Bill and Ted series. Now, Bill and Ted also being an MGM property at the time. So that kind of makes sense, I suppose. I can see where this could have worked. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
No way. No way.
It's kind of ironic, too, as in Bogus Journey, They also film at the Bio-Dome, which was the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant out in Van Nuys, California. I actually got to drive by this place once. It's still there. I was like, hey, it's the Bio-Dome. Let's go take a piss. And then it's like apparently at some point, the film was supposed to be a serious take, like on an environmental kind of serious movie about these two slackers getting trapped in the Bio-Dome, and then they got to work together and make it out, whatever. But for whatever reason, it turned into a Pauly Shore 90s comedy. Hey, no complaints here. But it is a very 90s movie, as seen at every turn, especially with the soundtrack, with bands like the Rugburns, Camper Van Beethoven, and the great Fourth Grade Nothing song that's also in the intro there. Fourth Grade Nothing also, some fellow Texans. I mean, we even get a safety dance montage. And of course, the cameo from the band Wax. And I guess we can't not talk about Bio-Dome without mentioning the very first on-screen appearance of Tenacious D.
Don't say we didn't say some freaking trees!
But I'm not a Tenacious D fan, so that's about all I'm going to say about that. The director of Bio-Dome would go on to direct another underrated 90s comedy, in my opinion, Overnight Delivery. Now, I talk about this a bit in my Chasing Amy video, but basically, that film was supposed to be Kevin Smith's next big project, and he was going to put his girlfriend, Joey Lauren Adams, in the film, which is kind of ironic here that Joey Lauren Adams already had a working relationship with that director. And basically, if you look into that story, Reese Witherspoon basically came in with her Reese Witherspoon and said, fuck off. Everyone pretty much shit on this movie when it came out. I saw it in the theater, but I must have been the only one. No one really seemed to like it. Like, it got lampooned, the Golden Raspberry, whatever, as shitty as those are. It's worth mentioning that this movie won a lot of those. Also, you know, it's like it got put on a lot of worst films of all times list, and this is around the time whenever like mainstream jokes were being shot at Pauly and Steven, you know, in some pretty big productions.
Searching for a boy in high school is as useless as searching for meaning in a Pauly Shore movie.
But it's also that, like, it's the silliness of the whole thing. Like, they're basically two cartoon characters. They're very annoying, by the way. Like, I get why people don't like this movie. But also, if you're a fan of Pauly Shore, it's pretty funny. In fact, you know what? I mean, the movie itself is pretty funny. There are some hilarious moments here.
I don't think he liked the way you play with his coconuts.
Back and to the left. Back and to the left. A clown.
And, I mean, for what it's worth, there is an environmental message there in this weird comedy. Other comedies don't even try to have an environmental message, right? Yay, Pauly. As stated in my threesome video, Stephen Baldwin pretty much completely disregards that film. He just denounced that whole, any rated R movie that he did, he's pretty much like denounced it. But here with Bio-Dome, well, Stephen basically champions it. Which is an overall tame movie, I guess, with Bio-Dome. They cut out all the actual marijuana smoking and stuff and just kind of mention it, you know, like with the purple sticky punch, you know, and I guess some pretty blatant womanizing as well. But it's not that bad, all things considered, you know. But in a lot of ways, Stephen Baldwin does credit this film for planting the seed in him as far as him realizing he doesn't really want to do the Hollywood thing anymore. Can't blame him, I guess. He went on to say, I can honestly say that part of God's plan for my life was to ignore the advice of my managers and make a movie that was universally panned by critics. Yes, God wanted me to star in a film about two brainless slackers who spend their days watching television, making out with their girlfriends, and drinking large quantities of various substances. The film was brainless and pointless and hilarious, and God wanted me to make it. I didn't think like that at the time, you know. Making Bio-Dome played right into my usual let's have a good time attitude. God had other plans for me. I just didn't know it at the time. Which is pretty strange. I mean, I'm not a religious guy or anything, but as a Stephen Baldwin fan, I totally get him, you know. It makes sense. And I actually really like that he loves this film so much. Pauly, on the other hand, well, he had mixed feelings about the film overall, even though he does appreciate that it is a cult hit for him, that it's a cult movie for him, you know.
The weasel shit dried up. You know, the movies didn't perform as well. I didn't listen to my agents. I wasn't like doing drugs. It wasn't like I got all fucked up.
It's just one movie didn't do so good, then the next movie didn't do so good, and then they eventually just stopped coming. Because you think about it like it's a business.
Yeah, Bio-Dome didn't do as good as Jury Duty, even though now like it's a big hit. It's a cult hit for me. But at the time, you know what I mean?
And of course, people would ask Pauly all the time, you know, about his co-star Stephen Baldwin, who he's still friends with. Pauly stated about his co-star Stephen Baldwin at the time that during Bio-Dome, he wasn't into the whole Jesus thing yet. He was a sinner, and now he's born again. So, you know, now doing that weird stuff, you know. The thing with Stephen is that he's very much, what's the word? He's an extremist. If he wasn't into Jesus, that means he'd be doing drugs and being crazy. So he's doing a lot better. He didn't mean extremist in a bad way, but that's what the press made it look like. As for Pauly Shore, well, this was the end of his iconic 90s run, and in many ways the last chance he got in a studio film this big. Pauly would then go on to star in the short-lived TV series Pauly. And after the cancellation of his show, you know, he decided to basically settle into more voiceover roles and smaller productions, although he would return in 2003 with his directorial debut, Pauly Shore is Dead, which would be, in my opinion, one hell of a start for Pauly's new journey, directing. I always recommended his documentary, Pauly Shore Stands Alone, for a real look into Pauly's world. Pauly Shore and Stephen Baldwin, you know, they're doing just fine now. And from time to time, they even bring up some sequel talk.
Whoa, get him, like old times, get him, get him, get him.
Dude, Bio-Dome is a cult classic.
Classic, yeah, we know.
Dude, we should go back to the studio and do a sequel, even if it's straight to DVD.
Interesting. Why you gotta cover the camera for that?
Right? Why do you have to cover the camera for that?
Because it's funnier with just the sound. Would you do it?
Probably.
But I got a great idea. Doyle finds Jesus.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Okay.
And like I try to like get you to read the Bible and everything.
That's
I'm like, look, Moses, and then he threw the things, and still the people wouldn't listen. So then he sent his son.
And with all that in perspective, I mean, it's not that hard to see how the film was basically set up for cult status. And I think there's many reasons why the film is considered a cult classic. Let's get to a few of them. First off, Bio-Dome is among the ranks of the great 90s stoner comedies. Regardless of any, you know, actual on-screen ganja smoking, I mean, it was still pretty obvious what they were up to.
Purple sticky punch.
And a lot of those kind of flicks, they remain popular amongst certain teens, and I'm guessing are still looked at fondly as a result. Another big element leading to the film's cult status is the overall supporting cast. It really feels like the production went out of their way to assemble a unique and specific cast of characters. I mean, let's take a look at the Rogues Gallery. We get 90s icon Joey Lauren Adams at her peak, as well as Rose McGowan and Teresa Hill, who would both go on to work with director Greg Araki. Of course, there's also the established character actors like Kevin West, and the mighty Taylor Negron, who really deserves his own episode already. I mean, he keeps popping up on this channel. And this time he plays yet another pizza delivery guy.
Fucking President Clinton.
You had sex with President Clinton?
Rest in peace, dude. And then you mix in some strangeness with, you know, a cameo from the then president's brother, Roger Clinton, who I'm guessing was a friend of Stabler and Crevoy, as he also popped up in Pumpkinhead 2. You guys remember that? And of course, we also get a small cameo from comedian Phil Lamar, always a welcome addition. And then, of course, the film's cult status street cred here. The biggest reason Bio-Dome probably gained that status is, of course, the casting of longtime John Waters collaborator Patricia Hearst as Doyle's mom, who really lends, you know, a strange kind of John Waters vibe to the already strange film. In fact, I like to think that Bio-Dome is somewhere in John Waters' strange little world. Then, as if that wasn't weird enough, you sprinkle in some A-list talent. It's It's a little bit of a strange choice, but Australian pop star Kylie Minogue decided to do the film, who famously stated that her father was embarrassed for her for doing this. And then, you round it all out with some heavy dramatic roles from legit actors like Henry Gibson, and one hell of a performance from actor extraordinaire William Atherton, in what I consider to be a career-defining role. Hell, we even get an Academy Award-winning director of photography here, the same dude that just did Dial of Destiny, actually. And last but not least, I feel a huge reason people still love this movie is just simply the team-up of Pauly Shore and Stephen Baldwin. I mean, we'd kind of see Pauly Shore team up before, but not really like this. In Encino Man and Son-in-Law, he was more of a supporting character to the overall story, And while I love Sean Astin, his character David is a total wuss. And, I wouldn't feel much chemistry between Pauly Shore and Andy Dick either, as far as In the Army Now goes, which is weird considering they're actually homies. And, Jury Duty was largely a Pauly Shore starring vehicle, so that's its own video for another day. I love that flick, too. And to me, also, Bud and Doyle are a legit wacky film duo, right up there with Bill and Ted, Beavis and Butthead, Joe and Hubs, Cheech and Chong, as their goofy, annoying, over-the-top performances are just stupidly endearing and a true sign of the times. And when it comes down to it, no other Pauly Shore movie had all of these elements at play, which is why I think the film has become a bona fide cult classic comedy. Overall, the box office failure of Bio-Dome was a real travesty, on a level not seen since the Great Chipmunk Fire of '79. But it has stood the test of time and has become a cult classic regardless, nowadays ranking high in Pauly's filmography. Although I have a very soft spot for Jury Duty. I love that stupid movie. I was lucky enough to see all these movies in the theater, and I await the day when Pauly makes his return to the big screen. Yeah, a Richard Simmons biopic would be cool. But I'd rather see a full-length Sin City Psycho. And let me know if I should cover the rest of Pauly's iconic films. And be sure to check out all the other videos I've made about Pauly. I've done a few at this point. I'll link them in the playlist for you. Until next time, staunch gang. Don't say we didn't say some freaking tree!